A lot of times we get the question where someone says, I know that I want to federally register my trademark with you guys, but I'm worried that it won't go all the way through. Do you have any tips and tricks and ways that I can help ensure that my trademark will actually move all the way to registration? Well, we can't exactly tell you everything that you need to know to get there, and we, of course, can't guarantee that what you submit will make it to registration, but there are some things that you can do and think about in advance to help encourage your trademark to be able to move all the way to registration. And we're going to talk about one of those main issues right now, and that is the strength of your trademark. But just a couple of quick things to remember. It is our mission as the USPTO to register trademarks. We want to be able to register your trademark. However, not every trademark is registrable. There is an examination process that takes place. You submit your application, it gets assigned to one of our trademark examining attorneys, and then she is going to examine the application to make sure that all the requirements have been met and that there are no reasons why it should be refused registration. If there are things that can be fixed, you can fix them, but there sometimes are things that can't be fixed, and the examining attorney will refuse registration. Well, actually, you can sometimes overcome things that are refused, but oftentimes the examining attorney is going to say, hey, right now anyway, your application cannot move forward. So you can respond to it and maybe move on, but chances are you're going to have to be dealing with a refusal at that point. But let's say that your trademark overcomes all of the requirements, overcomes all of the refusals, and it goes all the way to registration. One thing to think about is that sometimes your trademark registration might not be enforceable. Now, I know that might seem strange to think about because you've gone through all of the time and effort to register your trademark. Are you now saying that I can't enforce it? Well, sometimes maybe. And that's because of those common law trademark rights that exist out there. And so what you want to do is make sure that your trademark is both federally registrable and legally protectable. And what we're going to talk about right now is hopefully going to go a long way towards making sure that your trademark is both federally registrable and legally protectable. And what we're going to talk about is this strength of the trademark. So one of the reasons why an examining attorney sometimes needs to refuse registration of a trademark is because your trademark isn't actually functioning as a trademark. If we think about what a trademark does, it indicates the source of specific goods and services. If your trademark is just telling your customers what your goods are, that's not really indicating source. You're instead describing your goods or describing your services. And so the test that the examining attorney conducts is this mere descriptiveness test. And she's asking the question, does your trademark merely describe what your goods and services happen to be? For example, let's say that you are a potpourri manufacturer and your potpourri smells like apple pie and your trademark is apple pie, right? At that point, is that functioning as a trademark? No, it's just telling you what the scent of the potpourri happens to be. It is not indicating source, it's describing something about your goods. And if a trademark is descriptive, it will be refused registration. So let's break this down a little bit because sometimes that concept itself can be hard to wrap our minds around. So there's something that's known as the descriptiveness spectrum, but I like to think about it as a temperature gauge that goes weak to strong or cold to hot. You want your trademark to be in the hot range. You want your trademark to be fanciful or arbitrary or suggestive. You want to avoid the cold stuff down at the bottom where it's descriptive or generic. Well, let's talk through each of these things so you have a good understanding of what I mean by all of these terms. So let's start off with generic terms. So generic terms are really just the name of the thing. Okay, these are unregistrable at our office. They do not indicate source. An example would be milk as a brand name for a dairy-based beverage. You would never, ever, ever be able to register milk as a brand name for milk because it is telling you what the goods are. So please try and avoid using the name of the thing as your trademark, because when you're doing that, the term itself is not indicating source. It's just telling you, oh, this is milk. All right. So slightly better than that are things that are these descriptive trademarks. And these are things that describe something about the goods and services. These also are unregisterable at our office on what is called the principal register. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the principal register, that's the register that you want to be on. You want your trademark to be on the principal register because that gives you access to all of those nationwide benefits. There's another register that's called the supplemental register, and it's for trademarks that are capable of functioning as trademarks, but they're not really there yet. And it's possible to get your trademark on the supplemental register, but you don't have access to all of those nationwide benefits that you do on the principal register. So a descriptive trademark is going to be refused registration on the principal register. Now, it is possible, however, to get on the principal register if you can show the office that your trademark is no longer descriptive, but instead it has acquired distinctiveness. And that means when people see your trademark, they think, ah, yes, I know who the provider of that good is. I know who the provider of that service is. And at that point, your trademark is no longer just descriptive, but it has acquired this distinctiveness. Let me give you an example. That would be creamy whip for whip topping. So if we think about creamy whip as wording, we can see that it describes whip topping that happens to be creamy. And so creamy whip was refused registration at our office, but the creamy whip folks were able to come back and say, yes, maybe, but that wording has now acquired distinctiveness. So now it does function as a trademark. And we said, okay, yes, you can register creamy whip on the principal register with that claim of acquired distinctiveness. So is it possible to register descriptive trademarks? Yes, but the issue is that the scope of protection that you get for these sometimes considered conceptually weak trademarks is a pretty small scope of protection. Wouldn't you want to have a larger scope of protection? Well, you can if your trademark is instead suggestive. So as we move our way up this temperature gauge, we're moving into a little bit of a hotter trademark. So suggestive trademarks suggest something about the good or service, but they don't exactly describe it. These are inherently distinctive. They are registrable at our office. An example would be Coppertone for suntan lotion. So Coppertone doesn't describe suntan lotion. Instead, it suggests that if you use the lotion and you put it on your skin and you go out into the sun, your skin might take on a coppery tone. So you see, your brain is having to take all these leaps and jumps in order to connect the trademark and the goods. So that helps you because it is suggesting something about the goods or services without describing them, so you can avoid that refusal. And so if we think about the scope of protection that is created by this, it's slightly conceptually stronger. So the scope is going to be a little bit greater. So it's going to give you more protection against competitors who are trying to register similar trademarks to yours. But wouldn't it be better to have even larger protection? Well, it can be if your trademark is fanciful. This means that your trademark is a made-up word. It's invented, sometimes called a coined trademark. These are words that have no meaning in English or in any other language. They are inherently distinctive. They are registrable. An example would be Xerox for photocopiers, or Kodak for cameras, or Kleenex for facial tissue, or Pepsi for soft drinks. Now, we as consumers, when we hear those trademarks, boom, we automatically know what the goods or services are that are provided under those marks. But the marks themselves are actually just made up words. And those are conceptually very strong, and it creates this larger scope of protection for your trademark. Also, creating that strong, larger scope of protection would be an arbitrary trademark. Now, these are trademarks that have meaning in English, but the meaning has no relationship whatsoever to the underlying good or service. These are also registrable at our office. An example would be Apple for computers. So Apple, common everyday word, the name of a fruit, but that has nothing to do with computers or phones or watches or earbuds. Another example would be BlackBerry for a mobile device or Gap for a clothing store. So again, these are words that have meaning, but that meaning has no relationship to the underlying good or service. This creates a larger scope of protection. So that means it'll be tougher for your competitors to try and register something that is similar to yours because your trademarks are conceptually very strong. You're much more likely to get to registration with things that are at the top of our temperature gauge. Those fanciful, arbitrary, and suggestive trademarks. You're more likely to avoid a descriptiveness refusal if you have one of these sorts of marks. Now, there might be other reasons why your trademark should be refused registration because of likelihood of confusion or some other issue. But if you're wondering, what's one way that I can help my trademark make sure I'm getting all the way to registration? Well, thinking about the strength of your trademark is one of the great ways. Try and find something, create a trademark that exists at the top level, fanciful, arbitrary, or suggestive.